faith journeys, we're all familiar with the idea of call, the word call, the idea of call. And next Sunday, we're going to hear one of the best call stories of all time, and that is when the disciples are mending their nets or coming in from fishing, and Jesus walks by and says, "Follow me." And they leave everything, we read, and follow. And another story kind of like that is Abraham and Sarah, where God said to Abraham, and I'm sure he went home and advised Sarah, that they were supposed to leave their country and their kindred and go to a land they didn't even know what it was going to be, a land that God would show them. And there's something very exciting, very compelling about a story about someone where God came by and said, "Leave everything, come on, you're going to do something entirely new." And that did happen to me at least once in my life, and I know how exciting it is. But today's call story about Samuel is really not like that. Samuel's call story is a little bit famous because it goes into the song we sang last week. Part of it is, "I heard you calling in the night," and that's a reference to this story. But Samuel's not about to go anywhere. He's about to have what I'll call maybe the first bump in a long, long journey of faith. And honestly, that is something we can relate to a lot more than necessarily being told, "Pack up your bags, you're going across the world." So as we begin this reading today, we're thinking that Samuel might be about 12 years old. It doesn't explicitly say that, but with other things that come before it, we're figuring that's about how old he is. And he serves at the temple at Shiloh, and Shiloh is where God's house was, where the tabernacle was before the temple was built in Jerusalem. This is a long time before that. And his mentor, since he arrived here at maybe age 3, is Eli, who is in charge of that place there, God's holy place. We read in the prior chapters that this is a terrible time in Israel's spiritual life. It's a time when everybody just does whatever that person thinks is right in their own eyes. And things are just not going very well as far as obedience, as far as justice. Nothing is going well. And so Samuel is growing up at this time in Shiloh, in the Lord's house. And we need to do one quick flashback to know why is Samuel growing up, let's say, in the sanctuary. Well, before Samuel was a twinkle in his father's eye, his backstory is that his father was a really faithful man. And he was married to 2 women, Peninnah and Hannah. And he was faithful in that he always took his family to Shiloh once a year on a pilgrimage, and they would go and feast there, and they would sacrifice animals there, and they would worship God there. And so Hannah had never been able to have children. Peninnah had several. And so one year on this pilgrimage where they went to Shiloh, Peninnah was just poking Hannah and just like tormenting her about not having kids. And so Hannah, after the feast, she went to the sanctuary by herself. And she just laid it all before God. She was sobbing, and she was talking to God and saying, "God, I'm just so hurt, and it's such a hard life. Please, please, please give me a boy child. And if you do, I will dedicate that child to you. That child will be yours." Well, this same priest that is later raising Samuel, a long time before that, maybe he's 10 years younger or more, he sees Hannah just acting, moving her mouth and just acting all upset and acting all strange, he thinks. He jumps to the conclusion that she's intoxicated. And he calls her on it. I guess there's no morals in Israel, but Eli's going to say, "Hannah, why are you drunk here in church?" And she stands up for herself, and she says to the priest, "I am not drunk. I have something I'm praying about, and it's really important to me." And he says, "Well, then I give you my blessing, whatever it is." And after she goes back, and they go back home, Hannah does become pregnant. And that is the story of Samuel's birth. So when Samuel's about 3, because his mother said she would dedicate him to the Lord, Hannah and her husband, they bring him to Eli, and they turn him over to Eli, kind of like a foster parent. And he's going to grow up there in the Shiloh sanctuary. But they don't live nearby. I don't know exactly where they live. They don't live nearby. So once a year, when they come visit, the Bible tells us that Hannah and her husband visited the boy. And my favorite part of 1 Samuel is that Hannah would sew something, a small coat, for Samuel to have. So every year as he grew, he would have a new coat that she would bring to him. So back to today's reading. It's nighttime. It is the time before when the oil lamp is on, but it's dim. Samuel, who is now perhaps 12, is sleeping near the Ark of the Covenant, which is kept there in Shiloh. And the Bible says, "Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, he was lying down in his room. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. And then the Lord called, 'Samuel, Samuel.' And he said, 'Here I am.' And he ran to Eli and said, 'Here I am, for you called me.' But Eli said, 'I did not call. Lie down again.' So he went and lay down. The Lord called again, 'Samuel.' Samuel got up. He went to Eli and he said, 'Here I am, because you called me.' But Eli said, 'I didn't call you, my son. Lie down again.' Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again a third time, and he got up and he went to Eli and he said, 'Here I am, for you called me.' Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, 'Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." So Samuel went and lay down in his place. We'll stop for a moment now and just comment that the narrator is such a good storyteller. Don't you agree? What a great storyteller. He begins with a little mystery. A little mystery. Who's calling? What's going on? 3 times Samuel thinks Eli's calling him. We can imagine him getting out of bed, walking in the dark room, maybe several rooms, to wherever Eli is sleeping, going to see what he needs because he loves Eli. He's been bringing him up and he wants to make sure he's okay. The 3rd time Eli starts figuring out the mystery, he realizes that it's the Lord that's calling Samuel, almost certainly. He also knows, it says Samuel didn't know the Lord. I think that means Samuel hadn't had an interaction like this. Samuel did what he was told. He was a good boy. He was faithful, but nothing like this had ever happened. So he says, "Go lie down, and if it happens again, start praying. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." When he goes to lie down, do you think he's a little bit nervous? Oh, what's going to happen? So we go back to the text. After he goes and lies down, now the Lord came and stood there, calling us before, "Samuel, Samuel, speak, for your servant is listening." Then the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I'm about to do something in Israel that will make both ears of anyone who hears it tingle. On that day, I will fulfill against Eli all that I've spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. For I've told him I'm about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he didn't restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be expiated by sacrifice or offering forever. Okay, so what's this about? If we turn back to the first 2 chapters of 1 Samuel, we'll find out. The Lord is telling Samuel that he's going to be enacting some serious justice, and I won't go into details, against Eli's children, his sons. You see, they've been taking advantage of being the priest's sons, big time. For example, when people bring their animals for sacrifice, and the flesh is laid there for the sacrifice, they get choice cuts of meat before it is burned, and they take it for their own barbecues. And then they threaten anyone who questions this. Are you going to say something? Just try it. It also says that they target the women working at the temple, and that they're not nice to the women. So Eli has not been able to discipline them. They just do whatever they want. So God is revealing to Samuel that their days are numbered, that they are not going to be the next priest like they supposedly would be. That's not going to happen. It says now that Samuel lay there until morning. And then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord. It says Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. I think I can imagine myself tossing and turning the rest of the night. You know, you ever get a conversation in your head that you might have to say with someone tomorrow, and you're kind of playing it out. What if they ask? What are you going to say? What are they going to say? I'm sure that Samuel, like everyone else around, it makes it clear in the beginning of 1 Samuel, everyone knows what the sons are doing, and nobody is saying anything. And have you ever worked somewhere, because I have, where people are doing things and nobody's saying anything, and you just keep your own steady work going? It says in the Bible that Eli called Samuel and said, "Samuel, my son." He said, "Here I am." Eli said, "What was it he told you? Don't hide it. May God do so to you, and more also, if you hide anything from me of all that he told you." So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. And then Eli said, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." I really feel for Eli. Parenting is hard. And he once dreamed that his sons would take over and that they would be the priests there at Shiloh. Samuel respects Eli, and he didn't want to hurt him, but Samuel did the next right thing, and so did Eli. Samuel, I told you about a bump in his faith journey. This was a big bump. He told a difficult truth to someone he might have hurt, and did hurt. And Eli did the next right thing. He accepted the word of the Lord. You've got to give him that so graciously. Back to the very last part of the reading, verses 19 and 20. As Samuel grew up, the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, knew that Samuel was a trustworthy prophet of the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So this truly is a different kind of call story. It's really not what you might think when you start reading it, and the way it's quoted and used, and I absolutely love it. But God is calling to Samuel, not that he leave, not like, hey, you're the prophet tomorrow, you're taking over this place, get a new outfit, you're in charge. No. He just asked him to do, he told him something, and then he's going to be asking him to do one difficult thing, one hard thing. Before God calls him, his life is routine. He's just going along doing what he's supposed to do. He's a faithful boy. He's learning. he is growing. After God calls his name, same exact thing. It's like you went to work for 20 years, something big happened, and then you go back to work. That's how his call was. In between these routine days and nights, he is called to do this one challenging thing. And it's going to be years and years before he is going to be the lead prophet in Israel, a military commander. He's going to anoint the first 2 kings. So today's word from God is a word that I think I needed to hear. It's been a long time since God called me to leave everything and go to seminary in another city. And it's exciting when you have a call from God to go do something new. Some of us really hope God will say, move and do something new. And it's even more exciting when we have a conversion moment like the Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus. But you know what? Most of the time, God is calling us to do one thing. I know that the phrase, the next right thing, has pretty good history. It's used a lot, but I think that's what this is. To do the next right thing that will honor and please God and maybe help us grow on our spiritual journey. Occasionally that might be to deliver a difficult message like Samuel had to do. I thought about that, and what came to mind was one time someone I worked with and was a very close friend was relapsed in alcohol very badly, and we had to get an intervention group together of close friends and colleagues and tell that person that it was either go to rehabilitation or the alternative, which was really pretty unimaginable. A much bigger example as we approach Martin Luther King Day is to think of Dr. King and think of saying many, many difficult truths, knowing that they're not going to be accepted, knowing that you could be in danger. For many of us, there are a lot of, I guess you could say, more mundane examples. And I thought of a few, like scheduling a doctor's appointment that you really need to schedule, so do it. Reaching out to a friend to reconcile with them that hurt you, and you have been going years unreconciled. Giving a child new freedoms like Hannah did when she brought her child. But all of us sometimes have to give a child, a grandchild, grown or small, new freedoms and let God protect them. Let God be responsible for them. You're not totally responsible. Volunteering for a service that's outside our comfort zone, maybe the service that's coming up that's in the bulletin. One of the bravest things my father ever did was to turn over his driver's license before he was asked. Talk about the next right thing. I've always admired him for that. Today's call story is astonishing in its powerful simplicity. It's for everyone. It's for all of us. It's for the next few hours, the next few days. Sometimes God's call is to make a big change, and maybe you're thinking about one of those, and that would be exciting, but most of the time it's to do the next right thing, to just live our life faithfully and to listen to God and be guided. So in closing, I like this quote from the writer Anne Lamott. Usually if you pray from the heart, you get an answer. The phone rings or the mail comes, the light gets in the cracks, so you can see the next right thing to do. That's all you need. Speak, Lord, for your servants are listening. May it be so. Amen.